what makes you the right choice for the Board of Finance for Wilton?
Okay. That I've lived in Wilton for 26 years, and my husband also grew up here, and so he's lived here for a really long time. And I love this town. I raised my two children here. One went K through 9, the other went K through 12. My mother-in-law lived here, like we're multi-generational family of Wilton, and we love Wilton. And I feel that I'm now an empty nester, and I had a 21-year career in finance on Wall Street, where I was a managing director at Credit Suisse when I finally retired. And not finally, but when I retired. And I oversaw a department of about 25 to 30 people, give or take. And I was responsible for closing residential uh, uh, mortgage-backed securities. So basically, at our height, we were purchasing 4 billion a month in residential mortgage loans per month, and we were securitizing them or selling them we'd cut them, regroup them, and sell them either as pools of loans or most likely in mortgage-backed securities, which would then get sold to pension plans and endowments and all that stuff. Like it was all institutional. So at the height of my career, I managed, it was 48 billion in mortgage-backed purchases and sales in 1 year. And so as part of doing a mortgage-backed securitization, we would take the mortgages and I had a team of the data scrubbers that we call them tape crackers, but they scrub all the data. Then I'd oversee the people that interface with the law firms to write the prospectus supplements and also all the purchase agreements and everything. So I've dealt with law firms for forever. I dealt with the rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, all of them, Dun and Bradstreet, worked with all of them because these were all rated securities. So worked with every accounting firm you can think of because the accountants had to tie off on all these deals. And so, yeah, so I have a lot of experience dealing with lawyers, rating agencies, and accounting firms. And I have a degree in economics, and I think I'm well equipped to help with the town's finances. And I think that, Wilton is a great place. Our finances are strong. And I think not to go into the next question, though, I'm trying to keep it to 1 minute, sorry. But I just think I could bring a lot to the table, that it seems like things are not horrifying, but there seems to be a list of things that needs to be done. And I think I'm very good at problem solving and getting tasks done that are large and complex.
Well, you kind of touched on it when you said, our finances are good. Give us an idea of what your take is on Wilton's current financial state. And that's whether, how the finance department's being run to how we are in the market and how Moody's sees us, however, your view on the current financial state in Wilton.
Okay. So I think that again, that the financial state of the town is good, but I don't think anything should ever be taken for granted because, things can change in a minute. Things can change very quickly, and I think it's really good to be poised so that you're ready to react to things very quickly. So I'll get to the administrative part in a second, but, in reading like Moody's rating on us, and we're a AAA rated town, that it says some of our challenges, factors that could lead to a downgrade is contraction of the local economy is the number one thing. And, I think we have to be aware of, uh, sources of revenue, not just residential property taxes, but also like ASML and stuff. And we have to be aware, like, wow, tariffs and the H-1B visa situation, how is that going to affect ASML? Like, are they going to decrease their footprint here in the next 5 years, do those two things, or is it going to have no effect? Like, it's definitely going to have an effect. It's already, I think, again, tariffs and the H-1B visa program really adversely affect them. And you have to think, well, what if they make their own business decisions? And what if their decisions aren't what's best for Wilton, but they do what's best for them as a company? So, being poised and able to react to things like that, I think is really important. So again, that was Moody's said the number one factor that could lead to a downgrade is the contraction of the local economy. So So, that to me would be it because right now, 80% of our revenue for the town is in property values. So, and we have a really strong housing market right now, which, I guess after COVID and everybody left the city and all of a sudden every house in Wilton was turned over or 50% of them and housing prices went from, people couldn't sell their houses because their mortgages were underwater since 2008. And now all of a sudden everybody can sell their house. It's great. And we had a large turnover of housing stock in town. So, again, 80% of our budget comes from our residential mortgage, our residential property taxes. So, what if, there are some projections that on a national level, on a macro level, that we could see a contraction in our gross domestic product nationally based on tariffs and other things like that, that could cause the GDP to shrink a bit. So is that going to trickle down to Wilton? Absolutely. This strong housing market's wonderful and we love it, but it could become less strong or stabilize, or hopefully it never gets negative where we have, instead of a shortage of houses and prices are way up, hopefully we never have, too many houses at too low prices on the market, but which only happens when an economy contracts. But so again, on a macro level, I think we're good, but we're very dependent on our housing market and also on our uh, commercial entities in town. So then in terms of administratively, I would like to say, like, I don't think you should ever get hysterical about things and kind of like make inflammatory comments. But when you step back and look at everything that's going on, it's it's not really giving warm feelings of encouragement. It's not making me feel good or anybody really. If you look at it just on paper, you have a town administrator who's termed out and who has said, I don't want to come back. I'm not coming back. I don't want to. You have a CFO that was working two jobs that, quit or fired, depending on who you ask. And I guess we have this interim CFO from PKF who's here on an interim basis, but we don't have a permanent CFO. We just hired a new controller, I guess, yesterday or today. So I think that's amazing and that's great. But you had, again, the old controller leaving and going to the town of Fairfield. Like, so why did he leave? Like, that's not encouraging. Like, why, yeah, the CFO left because she had a second job and her husband's in Wyoming or whatever. But why is the town administrator leaving and not coming back? Why did the old controller leave and not come back? It's just there's a lot of red flags. And then the manager of financial systems and payroll, that apparently that's a job position they've been looking for a candidate for that for 2 years, which to me is shocking. Like I can't even believe that because that's just bizarre. Like like again, I made a career out of solving problems. So to think to say that you've been looking for someone for 2 years is just a bizarre statement to me. Like clearly nobody's been looking, obviously, I guess. So, and then we had Kellyanne Lenz, and she was a great CFO, and she left, and I don't know why, but like, did she get a better compensation package? Why did we not meet that package? Like, so again, if you look at it, you have one, two, three positions and four people that have left in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and one that you've been looking for 2 years. So I'm going to say it's in a state of disarray and it looks pretty awful. Yeah, not awful, but it looks really sloppy and like it's in a state of disarray. So you now have this interim CFO that's going to come in and try to bring some of his staff from his company, if need be, to kind of like get everything reined back in. And you have Tracy Haberman who's going to come in and hopefully do an amazing job. But it just begs the question, and I'm not one to point fingers and blame, but like, how did it get like this? And again, I'm not trying to blame, but it's more like figure out how it got like this so it doesn't happen again, because this is not, it's really high turnover in a really important area, and I don't know why that is, and I don't think it's acceptable, I guess. And I guess too, if I was in charge, I would, and I know like Board of Finance is a volunteer job, but I would be losing sleep over this and I'd be working around the clock to fix it. And I guess too, I just do think that that's one of the biggest issues that we face is getting our accounting department staffed. And the way I look at it, I guess there's the town administrator and then they oversee the CFO for the Board of Selectmen and the CFO for the Board of Ed, which I think it's a good thing that those are two different CFOs again, as combined as compared to one, how it was. It should go back to being two. And, I don't think any of this is unsolvable, but I think, yeah, that people have to roll up their sleeves and figure it out.
Well, talking about solving this as a problem, what's the Board of Finance's role and what would your part be in changing what they've been doing, or how would it look
Yeah.
different with you there?
Well, I'd have to reread the Board of Finance's mission statement on the website, but I think really it says our mission statement is producing the budget. So more or less. So, but all these things tie into that. So I think if I were on the Board of Finance, and I don't know how much they would let me do, but I would get more involved because I have time on my hands. I mean, everybody's really busy and I could find other things to do with my time, but if I was elected, I would put my time into this. And I would do more oversight. I would, if they would have me there in person, I was just saying to my husband today, like I would go 3 hours a day, like 3 or 4 days a week to like kind of help come up with either a strategic plan of like what needs to be done and all the steps, or actually if they need some of the steps to be done, like, but like I'm good at diving in and helping to solve problems. And so I guess I would probably go back to seeing when it was functioning properly and like obviously we have a temporary CFO right now, so I would want to work with him and say, how can I help you? And if he says, okay, I've got these four big categories, like if you could look at category one and digging down into that or whatever. But I'm very good at working with other people as a team and helping to come out with produce a plan for how we solve and execute a problem. So I guess what I would do is if people wanted to meet with me, I would sit down and brainstorm about, how we go about fixing this. But I'm sure that Mr. Centofanti, the interim CFO, already, let's hope he already has an idea. But if he needs help on executing it, since it looks like his only helper right now is Tracy Haberman, then then I'd be happy to jump in and help with that. And then on an ongoing basis, once things are kind of it's properly staffed and things are reined back in and we feel like they're under control again, I would want more ongoing oversight, not to micromanage, but just check in, like how are things going? Like what do you need? Like I could see myself going there, again, like I would go there once or 3 days a week if they wanted me and meet, how can I help? What needs to be done? They're like, oh, this is 6 months delinquent. How do we fix this? Okay, here's some ideas. I'll work with you to come up with a plan because that's what I did. Yeah. Because yeah, so I guess that's how, to the extent that they wanted me to, I'd be happy to work collaboratively to solve these issues. Because I think the next big thing that's coming up is the budget. And, I read in your great piece, Heather, about how Matt Raimondi, told Tony that the budget, you need it by this date. We're not kidding. Like, which it's funny that that is said, but
It might have been Jared's piece. I just want to make sure
yeah,
credit,
okay,
give
well,
it where
whatever.
credit is due.
It's in your
It's okay.
newspaper, yeah, in your newspaper. But
Yeah.
again, like people can't produce things, you can't get blood from a rock. So, to demand something is produced, yeah, that's great. We should have all these milestones that hold people accountable. But we should also, if that person or people are having problems accomplishing that task because they're short-staffed or something, then I would happily jump in to figure out how do we solve that problem. Because, if we don't collect good data, at town hall, then what goes into the budget is not accurate or on time. And we've also had, I guess, the last 2 years, our auditor, CLA, has found material weaknesses, material deficiencies,
Mhm.
where, again, it was like sloppiness, like stuff wasn't, I think, done on time, or you could go back retroactively and update it, and it wasn't happening. And if we keep having material deficiencies, that becomes, that's the type of thing that can, again, Moody's, another thing they said is that, you have to be prompt with publishing audits and stuff like that. And if you start to get sloppy with that sort of stuff, like, you would never want your rating to downgrade, because that makes your debt more expensive, and it could trigger just a whole lot of bad things.
Right.
So, yeah.
Have you watched the Board of Finance and if so, how do you think they've been functioning within their purview? How they've been managing budget situations with the Board of Education, with the Board of Selectmen, and how do you think it's been functioning?
I don't, okay, I've tried to do as much research as possible. And so what I have not, I'll be totally honest, I have not watched any Board of Finance meetings yet, but it's only October 1st, so I plan on that. But so how they're, what I know is basically what I read in Good Morning Wilton, and which is very informative and excellent, both of you. And so I think I more or less like what I'm reading. They seem like the Board of Finance seems like a very competent bunch of people. They seem like they work together for the most part, as far as I can tell, which is a good thing. Like, as one person said, numbers are kind of agnostic. Like, things add up or they don't. It's not, there's no gray area. It's like black or white. But I think in terms of how they work with the Board of Ed, I don't know. I think every year probably the Board of Ed asks for a little percentage increase, and then there's pushback, and but it always ends up at like a good spot, I think, because as evidenced by like your article today about we're ranked number 4 in Connecticut and number 88th nationally or something, I think. I think the process, it doesn't seem to be a confrontational or one. It seems that, people do the natural pushback, which is always, that's kind of a normal way of getting things negotiated. And it seems to turn out in a good way. And with the Board of Selectmen, uh, I think, that has been confrontational, as evidenced by Matt, like setting a hard deadline and saying, I'm not kidding, like you have to really adhere to this. And I guess last year the budget was phenomenally late. I'm told that the process, like as of April, I don't remember all the details, but as of April, one was presented that I think the town administrator said, like, I have no confidence that this is, I don't know. It seemed like the budget last year was extremely late, and that numerous people involved in it were not feeling really confident about it. Maybe that was the first red, kind of alarm sounding to the Board of Finance, like, wow, we need to have more oversight of this. We need to get more involved. I couldn't say, I don't really know extremely well how they interact with the Board of Selectmen, but I think, and also the Board of Selectmen budget, the Board of Finance can go over line by line, so they should be more active in that. But yeah, I mean, from all accounts, last year's budget was late, and people were not feeling good about it, meaning the town budget or the Board of Selectmen budget, and that's disappointing to me, and I don't think it should be that way.
You're talking about the Board of Education. We have a great school system, obviously, number one among thousands and thousands and thousands of districts. Couldn't we be number two and try a little harder, and try to have some savings there? There's apparently a lot of things the town would like to be spending money on. Is it really that big a deal to go from a class size of 19 to 19.5 or 20? But it's always a given that, well, of course, we're going to give the Board of Ed a 3%, 4% increase.
Yeah, so you're asking my opinion on that. Yeah, again, I had a career on Wall Street. So I had a career in a place where we'd be working 80 plus hours a week, and we'd be having breaking records for revenue that we brought in, and I was in fixed income, and yet, let's say the equity department's having a bad year, so we're told that across the board, there's a 10% cut in every department across the board. And you're like, what are you talking about? We're here, 80 plus hours a week, 80 to 100 hours a week already. Wait, I'm going to have to cut two people. Like, how can I do that? When we're making, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that yeah, I could see like telling the Board of Ed, like, guess what? Like, you got a 1% increase this year. Like, you're doing a great job. Like, I don't think that just because they keep the budget flat, it means you're gonna drop from number one to number two. Like, I'm not convinced that's true. And so I guess by telling my Wall Street story, what I'm trying to say is that I feel like every area has some amount of fat that can be cut from it, basically. And I think the Board of Ed is no different, that if we told them, you're flat or it's this much of a cut, like, yeah, is it painful? Of course it's painful. Could they do it? Of course they could. Is it going to mean that you're going to drop from number one to number two? Like, I'm not sure about that. I don't know. Nobody likes cuts, and I guess it's up to Board of Ed to figure out where they would cut. Um, you know, I don't think teacher salaries is like the place to cut personally, because I think teachers are your number one, they're in the trenches, they're your number one person that's gonna succeed, that guarantees success. But I don't know, does every room need a new whiteboard every 2 years? Like, I don't know, use an old whiteboard. Is that terrible of me to say? I don't know, but that's kind of how I feel.
I'm going to ask you now the converse question. So we've had a couple candidates who have said, Wilton is this affluent town. Why
Sort
are
of. Yeah.
why are we penny pinching when it comes to, town hall being in a state where the column falls down, or employers are working with coats on, or, we've scrimped and saved, but you're now facing, what is it, $150 million worth of capital improvements that we have to make over the next 10 years. Is it time to maybe say to residents, we have to dig deep a little bit more and represent Wilton in the way it should be represented?
Yeah, I'm there. I have numerous thoughts on that, but I guess okay, with the $150 million in deferred maintenance, I guess I need to dig further where that number came from. Was that one person's kind of wish list, or is that, or can you take the 150 million and, like, again, this is how I'd attack any problem, is break it down into bits. Okay, so out of the 150 million, like, what needs to be done in the next 3 years? What needs to be done in the next 6 years? What needs to be done in the next 10 years? What would be wonderful, but we're never going to have, so get rid of it. You know what I mean? So is it really 150 million, or is it 120 or 130? Like, I don't know. It might really be 150. I don't know, but that's the kind of thing I'd want to start by digging deeper into that and then breaking it up in terms of priorities. And sure, if a column's falling off the front of town hall, like, it should be fixed, obviously. But I did this kind of just real quick comparison of our peer groups, and looking at, population, and looking at like our budget. So Wilton has our annual budget's around, our annual budget is 141 million, give or take, 141.5 million. So that's the smallest budget. Like, Westport's 236, New Canaan's 181, Darayen's 184, Ridgefield's 175. So we do have the smallest budget right now, but we also have one of the highest mill rates. Our mill rate's 23.9, whereas Westport, their budget is almost double our size almost, and their mill rate is 18.9 versus our 23.9. So, and I'm like, well, why is that? But it's because they have more dense housing and they have more houses. They have, 9,600 households where we have 6,200. So they have more households, and a house in Westport, just I guess because their amenities, is going to cost more. Like, if my house here in Wilton gets assessed at X, it's going to probably be X plus a premium in Westport, because they have Campo Beach and they have that concert hall and all that. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that Wilton historically, we've had 2 acre zoning and we've been kind of more low key and we have less amenities, but we have this very high mill rate. Um, so do we tell people like, okay, it's time to pony up and spend more? Like, I'm not sure because I've been doing a lot of door knocking and basically, uh, people do complain about the amenities, the lack of amenities here, but also people are like, they don't, why is our mill rate so high when we don't get what like Westport has? So, I think it's a fine line. I'm going to go back. I'm not sure I'm totally answering your question. Like, I think that it's important that before we just go spend more and say like, okay, it's time. Like we've always like again, we have the smallest budget of any of our peer group. It's smaller than Westport, Buchanan, Darien, Ridgefield. It's smaller than all of them. So could we spend a little more? Uh, Probably, but I'm not sure it would be for the Board of Ed. It would probably be for the deferred capital investment, that 150 million or whatever that we seem to think we're missing. Um, but I don't think you can take it lightly to just tell people like, yes, we're a wealthy town, but also our median household income is lower than say Westport, but that makes sense because again, the houses are worth more there and they have more amenities. So I guess if I was on the Board of Finance, I'd go through the budget and come up with the budget and try be very aware that while some people have a lot of money in Wilton, a lot of people, there's people in Wilton that don't have a lot of money and that don't take, a minor increase very well. Like I go out to dinner with people and they're like, "Oh my gosh, my property taxes, blah blah blah." And some are people that can afford to pay higher taxes and some are people that can't. So I just think it's a fine line, and I don't know if that answered your question. Like, I don't think we should go on some spending binge. I do think that maybe we saved, I think that maybe we cut too many expenses in the past, that maybe, combining the two CFOs for Board of Ed and the town into one was probably a bad idea. I think it's good they're split out again now. Having 150 million in deferred maintenance, like that's bad. That probably shouldn't have happened. So, but I don't think that means we go on a spending spree, but I would try to be responsible and explain to people that complain why we have to do what we're doing.
Do you think the town should have both a CFO and a town administrator and a first selectman paying all those salaries?
Uh, well, I guess it depends on what they do because, again, in a $141 million budget, sure, 100,000 or 200,000 here and there makes a difference. I guess the administrator job is somewhere between 180 and 220,000, I think. Yeah, no, 180 to 200,000 for the town administrator. So in a perfect world, I would say, yeah, you should have a first select person and a town administrator. And then you should have the two CFOs, and then you need more analysts underneath the two CFOs, those being under Board of Selectmen CFO and Board of Ed CFO, and have more analysts underneath it. But that would assume that everybody's working hard and there's a strategic plan for the town and that that people earn their salaries basically is what I'm saying yeah, I think there should be assuming that everybody's working hard and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so I look at like Westport online, they have this thing called their budget book and it's lovely. It's this great presentation that just puts everything together and like it's really impressive. And I'm like, wow, that would be great if we could have that, but that would cost a lot of money or somebody would have to do that. But maybe that's a job like again, if the first select person and the town administrator is perceived as doing the same thing and they are doing the same thing, then no, you don't need them both. But I think, if, and I don't want to say what they each should do, but like, well, there's a job description for the town administrator, and I guess I could read it for the first select person. But like I think for the town, I think one of the things Wilton's always been lacking is a strategic plan. Like where is Wilton going? Like, yes, we have a POCD, but who makes sure that the POCD is actually adhered to or that we're doing what it says? Like, we spend all this time on it, and then it seems like it gets thrown on a shelf in the back closet, and nobody really looks at it again. And there are all these great ideas. Well, who's working with Westcog, or who's working with advanced CT, like who's working to get these things in that plan or other plans to realize, to get those things to take them from being a plan to being a reality. And if you had a board of first select person and a town administrator that's doing everything there, like the town administrator could, I just think, I guess I said it already, that if people earn their salaries, then yeah, I think you should have both. If people are like, oh, I don't have to do this because somebody else is doing it, or I don't know. I just think if you're, yeah, I think there should be two. We could do a lot more. We could have a much more vibrant strategic plan for this town. We could work with state resources, like I said, like Westcog or Advanced CT to really advance this town and bring new businesses here. And, you could do fun things like Yale University, like they probably have a suburban planning department, like, hey, do a case study on us, stuff like that. And if you had a town administrator on top of a first select person, you could do more of the strategic planning. So I do, but that's with the assumption that they both earn their salary. Yeah.
There was a reference you made before, about looking at what in the $150 million analysis of what needs to be worked on and what maybe could go. There's been, one of the big things that's been talked about is the upkeep of Wilton's historic buildings, whether it's part of the Ambler Farm property, the Yellow House, the Gilbert and Bennett building, even Town Hall, they've talked about replacing or repairing.
Yeah.
There are Board of Finance members on the Wilton Capital Planning Commission. And if you were on that committee, how would you approach that renovation versus tear down? Should we be owning those buildings anymore? What do you think?
Well, I guess I'd start with the easy one, which is Town Hall, which Town Hall it's definitely old. I don't know when it was built, maybe 1950 or something. I don't know, 60, 70. No, probably 50 or 60, I'm going to guess. But you want to make sure that, again, you want a vibrant town, so you want to make sure that Town Hall has, you want a good town hall that's modern in terms of, like, if you're going to house technology, like everything's moving towards technology, and obviously, which can take over a lot. So you don't want to have a leaky town hall. I don't know what the problems are with town hall. Like, I don't know if the roof's leaking or there's mice or whatever, or cable or optic fiber needs to be rewired or whatnot. Like, I don't know what the breakout is for town hall. I think cosmetic things are kind of, cosmetic is cosmetic, and that's pretty cheap. If it's like, no, we need this infrastructure changed because of, the quarters are too cramped, or it just makes, if it makes the work inefficient and troublesome, then yes, town hall, you should fix it. In terms of historical buildings, like that's part of why I live in Wilton. And I think a lot of people that live in Wilton, they love the tradition, the history in Wilton. Everybody, if you didn't love the history, you probably wouldn't be living here, I guess, except for it's more affordable than other towns next to it. But so for Gilbert and Bennings, like I think that's a beautiful building. I don't think it should be torn down. I think we should do some sort of partnership. I don't want to say, get people upset, but like maybe you do turn that back into a kind of community center or art place, and then also add like, I don't know, 40 affordable housing units in there or something. Like, I think affordable housing is a big problem in this town. And I think that when we own land, instead of just selling it and like, here, it goes to the highest bidder and whoever buys it, do whatever you want there, as long as it meets our regulations. And if we have to change some regulations, we'll change them. Like, no, I would be more a fan of working collaboratively with a developer to come up with things that we need, such as affordable housing, where we get what we need. We offlay the financial burden, and the developer makes some money, and that's a win for everybody. So, again, in Westport, they have these cluster cottages that they build on town-owned land, where they take town-owned land and they put clusters of affordable housing units on it. And again, then we're not paying for the upkeep. Some developer has made money off of it, but we're not we're not subject to the developer just doing whatever they want and we're reacting. We're a partner in the process in terms of turning Gilbert and Bennett or Bennett and Gilbert, whatever, into something we actually like. Like, I think it's a beautiful building. Yeah, it's expensive, so we should partner with someone that's in this, does this for a living and figure out what's creative that we can put there that, so it's not an expense to us. It makes money for the developer or whatever, and maybe there's affordable housing in there and a fun art guild and community thing there. And again, that house next to the high school, like who would you sell that to and who would buy it? It's right next to the high school and it's sandwiched between a high school parking lot and Route 7. But, maybe you renovate it and put 4 affordable housing units in it and you hire someone to manage it. Like, again, this is a project where you can put out RFPs and you need someone with vision that's going to look at it and like what we do with it. But I know the capital planning committee, like, I don't know, it seems like right now they're like, oh, these houses need too much thing, let's just sell them. And I'm like, I'm not sure just sell them is the optimal answer. Like, okay, like there must be a way that we can get rid of the expense, but actually do something we want in town. And like I said, like we don't have enough of affordable housing. You can make these cluster cottages of affordable housing and show that we're working on the number and maybe get a moratorium for the 830G stuff. But just, I don't know, just the selling stuff, like, oh, we've got problems, so just sell it. Like, I'm not a fan of that. No.
What
I think,
about in terms of, I don't know if you watched any of the process during the Ambler Farm lease discussion and the Board of Finance getting involved in that. Do you think
yeah.
that, the Board of Finance handled its concerns well? Was the town's interest represented? Was Ambler Farm? What do you think about that whole situation?
Okay, so again, with that whole situation, I only am aware of what I read in your newspaper. So I did not watch it online, and I read the article probably 2 weeks ago, maybe. So it's not completely fresh in my mind. But, another thing for me, and this is maybe from my career on Wall Street, it's always you ask the question, well, what's the option? What's the alternative? So I think with Ambler Farm, like, okay, I understand that the town doesn't want the expense of the yellow house, and I don't remember if it was like $1 million to renovate the yellow house and another million for the white house or something like that. But like again, like why not turn the yellow house into 4 or 5 like 900 square foot affordable housing units or studios or 1 bedrooms or something like so but in terms of how the Board of Finance handled that, like of course I understand their concerns and no, you don't want to have a 100-year lease. That's kind of crazy, but maybe it's a 40-year lease or 50. Like that doesn't seem like it should be a big hurdle to overcome. And then I think asking friends of Ambler Farm that they should be more responsible for the financial upkeep of it, I did not agree with that because I feel that I'd have to look more closely at what Friends of Ambler Farm does, but I think that they truly manage the property and they're a 501(c)(3). It's not like they're holding events there. Like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, if they hold events there or something, or they're using it and they have their Friends of Ambler Farm events that they have there, do they make money on any of that stuff? And if they make the money, what do they do with the money? Does it go back into like it just Friends of Ambler Farm, I guess, does not strike me as a money-making undertaking. So I'm not sure why the town would be looking to them then to be like, okay, you have to contribute to the financial upkeep of this when, that was never the agreement. And from what I read, that, they kind of not as a favor, but they're providing a service to the town for free. They're like a property manager of this historical property, and they're basically the property manager, and they're not getting paid for that. I don't believe. Do they get money from the town? No, right? So it seems like they're actually providing an unpaid service, that they're a property manager for this town property that we all love and that we all use. Like, yeah, I used it much more when my kids were younger, but and again, being from Wall Street, it's kind of like, well, what's the alternative? So if Friends of Ambler Farm is saying that again, like you can't get blood from a rock, like we are not, no one here wants to undertake fundraising for that property. Like, don't put it on us. We can't do that, and we didn't sign up for that. Okay, so then what are you going to do? Are you going to like sell Ambler Farm? Are you going to try to find somebody else to like take care of it? Like, what are your options? And I just feel like Friends of Ambler Farm has worked really hard and done a really good job. And I think that they should be treated as a partner with respect. And I'm not sure that's what happened. The fact that they got a grant and it's a matching grant and I think it's a matching grant, but that it's not even collected. Like, I don't know. Again, I just felt like the Ambler Farm situation, it seemed combative. And I think that it's a bunch of really good people on both sides and that everybody should be working together to come up with a creative solution, not kind of battling the way they are.
One of the other issues that has come up in front of town officials is about the $2.6 million in unpaid taxes. And officials are talking about a tax sale. What do you think about that?
Well, that's kind of dovetails exactly like with what I used to do because as mentioned, we would buy hundreds of thousands of residential loans, and a lot of them, you can buy distressed assets, but you can buy loans that were good and then they go delinquent or they go into foreclosure or whatnot. So I think that you can, again, you could, and I don't know if they've done this already, but there's companies out there that manage distressed assets, they're called, and you could someone has to look at each property individually, and usually like a mortgage loan servicer would do it, or you have these special companies that spun off that just they service troubled assets. So if someone's delinquent in their taxes, they reach out and like, okay, why are you delinquent? My husband, or my wife or whatever, I lost my job, but I have a new job coming in like, I have signed a letter of intent or a contract and I'm going to have a new job in, a week or two. Okay, fine. Then let's work on a plan for repayment of the taxes. So that kind of group that would be one bucket of people, the ones that can be cured, right? The delinquency can be cured. Then there might be another one where like the other bucket, like, okay, there's no hope that this delinquency can be cured. Then, I do think that to have a tax sale, I mean, if you can't, if a person owes their taxes and let's say they've owed them for 10 years or something and they can't pay them and they're never going to be able to, then okay, if that person was like 94 years old and their life expectancy, not to be harsh, is like 2 or 3 years, then I'd be like, okay, fine, like just put those in a different bucket over there. But if it's like people that if you don't, yeah, if your taxes are really delinquent and you haven't paid them, then there are legal steps that are taken, and there are companies that do that for a living. And you give them notice, and then I think you have to give like each state has its own regulations and laws around it. But then 30 days later you give a second notice, and then 30 days later you give a third notice. And then you like advertise it in the paper, and then you have a sale or whatever, foreclosure sale or whatever it is. But like, yeah, I think that unpaid taxes should be dealt with. I think it's kind of like if your house has a leaky ceiling and you have wood rot, like you have to take care of it because if you don't, it just gets worse and worse. And if people have unpaid taxes, then yeah, I think that they should be dealt with. But I think that again, there are companies you hire that do it legally, and you can hire companies too that'll say like, okay, here, we'll look at this portfolio. You give it to them on a line by line basis. They look at it, they come back, okay, we'll reconcile it. We'll give you 70 cents on the dollar. We keep whatever's left. There's lots of creative ways to do that. And I don't think it necessarily means throwing people out on the street because you can, you go through each one and you divide them up in buckets and you deal with the different buckets accordingly.
Let's talk about the issue of transparency, transparency from town hall, from different boards. What is something that you might do or suggest, or what's your philosophy about, transparency when it comes to, executive sessions and open sessions and communicating with the public?
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of transparency because I just am. I just think it's the right thing. And again, I come from a corporate culture where we're told on day one that, assume everything you say is going to be printed on the newspaper the next day or everything you do. So uh, I I don't quite know. I'm not up to speed on the legal definition of like when you can call an executive session and when you can't and stuff. But I don't know, just reading Good Morning Wilton again recently, like the whole like yelling behind closed doors, like it makes for good reading, actually. It's very entertaining. But I don't understand that. Like I don't, aside from it being moderately amusing, like I don't understand that I don't understand why it's like that. And I'm a huge fan of transparency, that if you think, if this is what you think should be done or what should be, as a Board of Finance member, if I say, yeah, here's what should be done, we should do a 5% cut across the board with everyone, like I'll come out and say that in public or whatever. Like, I guess there's sometimes when things have to be private, if it has to do with, maybe there's some personal issue or something, then yeah, let's not put that in the paper. We don't need to do that. But if it's policy or hiring decisions for positions in town that have an enormous impact, like I think it should be public. I do think that sometimes, you get some people that, I don't know, have time on their hands and will attack or write about anything you do, like that. So you want to kind of minimize the noise. You have to, you can't let everybody in the town have their say on something. But on the other hand, I do think you should be transparent. And so, for example, like P and Z, I'm not like, I don't know why are their meetings still by Zoom. I don't understand that. Why are they not back in person? And I think that's, again, I guess I don't want to be quoted, but why is that? Is it just because it's easier to just say how you feel on a Zoom meeting when nobody can comment? Is that why they do it? I don't know why.
I want to make sure you understand you are being quoted on everything. This is
Yes, I understand that. That's
okay.
why I stopped.
Yeah.
But I just,
But let me ask you
again,
this
yeah,
then. Yeah, because I think we've covered the main topics, don't you think,
yeah.
Jen? So,
I just, one
30,
more thing. Can I say one
sure.
more thing? That I do feel like, I do think people have a valid complaint, especially with P and Z, that it's kind of like, you can't make a comment until the application is official. And then by that time, like the horse is like a couple years out of the barn. And it's annoying. It's frustrating and people are frustrated and I understand why.
I got to say, you've touched on a lot of planning and zoning issues. Did
No, not a
did they
lot.
maybe put you on the wrong spot?
No,
Did
no,
you?
no, no, not a lot. But I think that's another thing about us, the Democratic platform. One of our things is that I do feel strongly that the board should be working more together, like the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Ed, the Board of Finance, P and Z. Like, do they have like once a month or once every 2 months? Is there a meeting with like the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and let's say P and Z to like, hey, this is our POCD says we want to do this, but like we haven't really been adhering. I don't know, like what the POCD, I don't even know when anybody, I love it. I think it's awesome. I don't really understand how it's being implemented in the decisions that are made day to day. So I think P and Z, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance should maybe have meetings together, maybe once every 2 months and just talk about strategic initiatives.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last question, it's an easy one. It's a 30-second elevator pitch for why you should be a voter's choice for the Board of Finance.
Because I think I'll work extremely hard. I'll say I'm extremely transparent and I say what I'm thinking. I'm an excellent listener. So if people are like, I disagree with you with what you said because of reasons X, Y, Z, I certainly am willing to respect that and to listen to that and to see if perhaps, you know what? Yeah, I was wrong. Maybe you are right. So I just think I'll work really hard and I have a great financial background and I care about this town and I'm a good listener and I want to do what's best for this town.
Great. Kari, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Did it. Thank
Thank
you.
you.